right, Monday Morning Quarterback, episode 212. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight we're going to talk about shock base valves. But before we get to that, a couple questions that have came in. One on last week's video where we talked about shock pistons and what would my selection be for pistons for a pavement style sprint car. This particular viewer was from the UK. I didn't know they raced pavement sprint cars over there, but that's cool. Typically we start with our high flow piston with like a ring shim type setup, which allows us to get a little bit of a digressive type curve on the rebound side, so we can have more low speed rebound control without a ton of high speed. So that's typically where we start. That piston flows a lot of fluid, so it's good to control, gives us lots of opportunity to control that and do different things with the graph. And that's a high grip piston, which typically on the pavement, most scenarios anymore, the tracks that the sprint cars are racing on are fairly low grip. There's not too many new pavement tracks being built, and once the grip goes away, it doesn't come back. So it's not like a dirt track where when we get there, hot laps are going to be grippy every week. Once the track deteriorates, unless they do a repave, the grip's gone, and we don't see a lot of repaves at these short tracks just because of the cost of a repave and what they're doing. So I mean, heck, you don't even see a ton of repaves on like NASCAR style tracks anymore because of the cost associated with it, and then kind of makes for bad racing for a little bit until the grip wears away. So that was the first question. The second one came from our quarter midget build video, which I did a number of years ago when Hudson was racing quarter midgets, and it said, why waste money on powder coat? I'm assuming this question came from somebody that does not live in a humid environment. I currently have one race car in my shop right now that is not powder coated, and you Scotch-Brite and WD-40 that thing like every other week to keep the rust off of it. So while powder coat is a luxury, it's also a necessity in the Midwest unless you want to continually Scotch-Brite and WD-40 or linseed oil your chassis to keep it from rusting. The reason powder coat versus paint is just holds up so much better. So there is a little bit of weight to it. Been fortunate that Hudson's fairly little, so we've always been adding lead to the car, so the couple pounds that the powder coat weighs really isn't an issue. So that kind of answers that. So tonight's topic is shock base valve. So we've been working through a segment here where we talk about the different components of a shock. Hope you get something from this video. When we cut back, we're going to talk about where Monday Morning Quarterback is going throughout the winter. So without further ado, here's that video. All right, as we're kind of wrapping up the key components inside of a shock, one of the last ones we're getting to here is the base valve and why it's important. So this is a base valve out of one of our large body twin tube shocks, out of a small body monotube shock. So they're basically a pressure management device. It's going to reduce the amount of pressure inside of the shock, and on a monotube it's going to allow you to run significantly less gas pressure, and the reason is it is reducing the pressure against your divider piston, which keeps the shock from cavitating. So this is the piston that will keep the oil and nitrogen separate in your shock, and that base valve fluid's flowing through there, and it's reducing the amount of pressure that this divider piston sees. When you are building your shim stack for your base valve as a shock tuner, you are going to build that based on what your dampening force is on the main piston. So this, while they don't have to flow identically, they do need to work in harmony to have a balanced package. So if your base valve's too stiff, you'll see a lot of separation on compression open and compression closed side of the graph, or if it's too soft, the same. So tuning your base valve for the velocities you're going to see and the dampening force you're going to see is super important, and that's why when you're tuning a base valve or coming up with a base valve build for the first time, you need to run your shock at a high speed on your dyno, and try to match what the car is going to see on the racetrack, because if the base valve is balanced and tuned at 6 inches per second perfectly, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be balanced at 20 inches per second or whatever the peak velocity you're going to see is. So it's something we work really hard on, is tuning that base valve for its exact application. So a simple base valve design is going to be, it's basically another piston. It's a piston that has a shim stack on it, like we talked in the last few weeks. So, you know, both of these have pyramid stacks on them. They both have a bleed in them, similar to your main piston, either a bleed shim or a bleed in the main piston. So it's going to have a bleed for low speed, and then it's going to have a shim stack, and then a check system on the backside. So pretty simple design. They really came about in the 2000s. The initial monotube shocks that came into our markets in the 90s did not have base valves, and you were having to run upwards of 100 psi in them to keep them from cavitating, which worked really well. They responded really well when the track was fast and tacky, but as the track slowed down and you needed grip, we found that running that high gas pressure really prohibited the amount of grip that you could generate out of your shocks. So base valves came about, like most technology, trickled down from Formula One. I would say most every shock on the market now in our core markets utilizes a base valve. We even utilize it all the way down to our quarter midget shocks to reduce the amount of pressure we have to run. So that's a base valve. That's what it is. They come in different shapes and sizes, just like your main piston. The key to them is tuning them properly, again, for the velocities and the dampening rates you're going to see at those velocities from your main piston. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. All right, I hope you guys learned something there. We've kind of taken an aerial view on shock components the last 4 weeks or so, and we've had a lot of requests to do a deeper dive in actual shock building. So we are going to start that next week. We are going to go through the rest of the winter, leading up to where we take our winter break for Christmas Shootout Chili Bowl. And we're going to do a deep dive each week into shock tuning, different aspects of shock tuning. We're going to be having shocks apart, building shocks, putting them on the dyno, and showing you real life. So looking forward to that. Be sure to tune in next week to catch the first part in that shock building segment. And thank you guys for watching. Hope you have a fantastic week.